Okay, what we have here is a Sony DAT recorder. This was a this one's a model DCT 790. One of the later Sony DAT machines that they made. I've always been very fond of DAT. It's one of my favorite formats, and I actually have an ES model that I use on a regular basis. And I just happened to find this one here a number of years ago, and I bought it as a backup. It hasn't got a lot. Uses a lot for playback of stuff. Use my ES machine to make recordings on. Use this one as my playback machine. This one here, the mechanism has become gummed up, and it's getting some problems. So we're going to take this thing apart and see if we can service it. And I've already pulled the top off it now, so we can take a look inside here. These mechanisms are really quite neat. They almost resemble a little VCR, like a little head drum in here that spins around and makes the recording. There's a very, very small little mechanism in here. The portable DAT, which I've got the little Walkman DAT as well, is even much more smaller than this and almost impossible to work on. But this is the full-size mechanism. I'm going to pull this mechanism out here, because I know it's getting kind of gummed up, and I think probably what the problem is the lubricant on the take-up spool down here is dried out. So we're going to take this thing apart, and we're going to try and put some lubricant on there and see whether we can get this thing going. I've already repaired this one once, and that's what happened to it the last time. But again, just from disuse, I got to remember to use these things, because if they sit around, that's when they start to act up. Best thing you can do with your electronics, especially mechanical devices like DAT machines or VCRs and so forth, is to actually use them on a regular basis. The mechanical devices just do not like to sit around. Just like anything else, like a car, you don't want to let your car sit for years on end without starting it, or you're going to end up with a lot of problems. So that's what's happened on this one, is I hadn't been using it, and when I went to use it, well, it didn't work. So we're going to take a look at that tonight and see if we can get the sucker going. So now the mechanism's removed from the chassis, you can actually see how this thing works. So this is the door, which I just kind of propped open. What makes the mechanism, if I turn the loading and unloading wheel by hand, you can see that the cassette tray lifts up, and then the door swings open to allow you to load a cassette. And I'm thinking probably what's happening is down here these little reels are gummed up. So we're going to take them apart, and we're going to try and lubricate the inner workings of this this spool assembly here. And appears that the take-up spool is not turning, so that's what we have to investigate, is the take-up spool and see why it's not turning. It's more than likely just the lubricant has either dried up or the pendulum gear below is sticking. But that's where we're going to get to next. Well, on closer inspection, I found the problem. Little solenoid here, I don't know if you can see it there, this little solenoid right down here is supposed to engage this plastic lever. And you can see the plunger is, well, I don't know if you can see it there, but there's the plunger, that black thing. It's supposed to sit in here. There's a screw right in here, which has come loose, that holds that plunger in place, and it's allowed this solenoid to drop off of the chassis. This is what releases the brakes to allow the reels to spin. So there's our problem. You can see the solenoid loose in there. There it is there. See that little solenoid? That little solenoid's come unscrewed from the chassis. So we just have to reattach. You can see the screw in there that's hanging half out. I just have to take this thing apart and reattach that plunger, and that should solve my problem. Make me a very happy camper. Get my DAT deck back in operation again. So very carefully, I've got the camera tipped on its side, or not the camera, the DAT machine tipped on its side. I'm going to try and manipulate this unit back into place. I'm just going to take these screws out right now. There's one there, just to get them out of the way right at the moment, because this is kind of a tedious little job here to get this little solenoid back into place. So I'll get the plunger back in there. Oops. See if I can hold this thing in place with one hand while I get the screws in place with the other. Okay, there it is. It's in place. And let's get one of these screws in place and try to thread it in. Maybe able to hold that in place with this other screwdriver long enough that I can actually get the screw in place. There we go. I don't know if you can see that now, but now that plunger is back where it belongs. So now we can put the mechanism back together, which again might also be a little more tricky here because I had to pull this whole assembly apart to do this. But it should go back together relatively easily, I'm hoping. Just gotta line up a couple of screws here and a couple brackets. There's a lever in here as well that's come undone. So it's easier said than done, but we'll work at this and get this thing back together. I'm glad I don't work on this crap every day for a living anymore. I forgot how much I really enjoyed taking this tiny little pieces of shit apart and working on them every day. Okay, and if I turn this should bring the mechanism up and out, which it does, and it accesses that other hole at the back here, which I can put this last screw in. Magnetic screws are a pain in the ass sometimes. They're very handy at others, but then when you've got your hands full and you're trying to get them in place, they can be a pain in the butt. There we go. So that's got the mechanism back together. If I put the belt back onto the loading motor here, around the loading pulley so that we can observe the operation of this mechanism as I run it through the paces by hand. Okay, that's open, and then the tape goes in and it drops down. See that? We'll open it up again. There we go. And close it down. That should be fixed. And here's this little solenoid that had come apart. See, there's that little solenoid there. What that does is that releases the brake on this spool. See, the spool by my finger here doesn't turn. When I release that brake, then this one freewheels, and this is the spool that wasn't turning. So now we'll reattach the circuit board that I took off just to free some wires up. We'll reattach the circuit board here using these screws, and we'll put the unit back into the chassis. And if all is well, I should be able to put a tape in and have it working. So here's the last screws to go in to hold the little circuit board on the bottom here. These wires out of the way. We don't need to get any wires caught in the mechanism. There's one more screw here. And then we've got a little piece of tape that we'll use to tape these wires back down out of the way. Okay, now for the rest of the mechanism. As you can see here, here's the head, and if I turn this loading gear by hand, you can see the little guide post coming up. See a little guidepost? They're what threads the tape onto that head drum. It's only a 90-degree wrap, unlike a VCR, which is 180. And the 90-degree wrap keeps the tension low, and it also improves the lifespan of the tape and the heads. Tension is very low, and then this head drum spins. I believe it's 2,000 RPM on these decks. Mini DV, the digital videotape, the head drum spins an amazing 9,000 RPM. I'm pretty sure it's only 2,000 on here. This little wheel here, this little lever here, it's got a little pad, a little piece of plastic, a little plastic strip that actually cleans the heads when you load and unload the tape. It drops up against the head wheel as the motor is slowing down to scrape off any debris from the heads. Pretty ingenious, huh?